Biden's infrastructure package, which he unveiled yesterday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Here he is talking about how he is choosing to increase taxes on people making over $400K a year, plus increasing the corporate tax rate in order to fund said infrastructure package.
As I said 4 years ago, as I said, the Congress passed a tax cut of $2 trillion, increasing the national debt $2 trillion. It didn't meet virtually any of the predictions it would in terms of growing the economy. Overwhelmingly, the benefits of that tax package went to the wealthiest Americans. It even included new investments that would profit by shifting profits and jobs overseas if you're a corporation. It was bad for American competitiveness, deeply unfair to the middle-class families, and wrong for our future. So here's what I do. I start with one rule. No one, we say it again, no one making under $400,000 will see their federal taxes go up, period. This is not about penalizing anyone. I have nothing against millionaires and billionaires. I believe American capitalism. I want everyone to do well. But here's the deal. Right now, a middle-class couple, a firefighter and a teacher, with 2 kids making a combined salary of, say, $110,000, $120,000 a year, pays 22 cents for each additional dollar they earn in federal income tax. But a multinational corporation that builds a factory abroad, brings it home and sells it, they pay nothing at all. We're going to raise the corporate tax. It was 35%, which was too high. We all agreed 5 years ago it should go down to 28%, but they reduced it to 21%. We're going to raise it back to up to 28%. No one should be able to complain about that. It's still lower than what that rate was between World War II and 2017. Just doing that one thing will generate $1 trillion in additional revenue over 15 years.
Did I must have missed that the first time I watched that clip. Did he really say we all agreed to put the corporate tax rate down to 28% from 35%?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the problem with this whole clip is he's so concerned with, making sure he's not seen as raising taxes on anybody who says below 400K, right? And that ultimately, I think, why the AOC clip is important is, and I'll get this also this graph that will show about the actual tax burden.
Get that ready.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I mean, that he spends the whole clip for some reason, or the whole 2 minutes of that speech, on the defense for literally no reason. This is an overwhelmingly popular idea. Sell it to people, because what you're doing is the bare minimum. Again, the Trump administration cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Biden wants to put it back up to 28%. That is the bare minimum. And yet he's trying to make it seem like this is a middle ground approach to put it back up to 28%. No, it should be higher than 35%. Why are you making the Republicans' case for them? He slipped back into 1990s, don't talk about raising taxes Biden, when he really could just make the case that this graph here makes, Matt. We can play it as we talk about this. So look at how started from, well, this is at the end of the graph.
Yeah, I'll restart here in a second.
This is how taxes, there we go, for earners, the highest tax rate has gone down over the years. You see all the way up there at 70% in 1950. In the 70s, it's fluctuating around the 40s and 50s. In the 80s, steep cuts, continues to go down, continues.
Meanwhile, getting slightly more and more regressive on the lower end the entire time.
And now here we are in the 2000s, below 30, continuing to go down. Obama nominally raised it. And then 2018, we're all the way down at that 20, or at what was the figure for people earning that amount of money? I'm not exactly sure, but we're already down there. So Biden could have spent his time making that case as opposed to talking about why he's meeting the Republicans in the middle ground there. this is a no-brainer approach to raising revenue, and it should be treated with aggression by the Democratic Party. It should be more than what Biden is proposing, and you should not be constantly on the defense and explaining yourself, because that makes you sound weak, and the proposal in and of itself of raising taxes on high-income earners and corporations is wildly popular.
Yeah, and you're right. It is like the playing defense thing, because that's where the attacks are coming from the Republicans. It's just like a massive wish list for all the, the things the Democrats want and stuff like that. And you just have to say these things are necessary. It's not a wish list. What we're actually doing is necessary.
Exactly. And not constantly trying to make yourself seem not radical. But let's turn to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Last night, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went on Rachel Maddow's program to explain why she and her progressive colleagues feel Biden's infrastructure proposal is too small, and I agree with her. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Joe Biden said for COVID relief, he wanted $1.9 trillion. Everybody assumed that would get whittled way down and some much smaller package would ultimately pass. It didn't. It did get cut down a little bit, but not that much. It was basically a $1.9 trillion plan. Sounds to me, from what I hear you saying tonight, that on this one, what may happen is that President Biden may say, listen, today in Pittsburgh, I want $2.25 trillion over 8 years. But when it lands in the House, you and your colleagues may say $2.25 trillion is a starting point, but this needs to be a bigger bill. This needs to get larger before the Senate even gets a look at it. Is it fair to expect that that may be the way this goes?
Absolutely. If we could wave a magic wand and the progressives in the House were able to name any number and get it through, which obviously isn't the case, but if we're looking at ideals and what we think is the actual investment that can create tens of millions of good union jobs in this country, that can shore up our healthcare, our infrastructure, our housing, and doing it in a way that draws down our carbon emissions to help us get in line with the IPCC standards, we're talking about realistically $10 trillion over 10 years. And I know that may be an eye-popping figure for some people, but we need to understand that we are in a devastating economic moment. Millions of people in the United States are unemployed. We have a truly crippled healthcare system and a planetary crisis on our hands, and we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. So we can do 10 trillion. That is a thing of political imagination. However, even when you break it up into those two parts, what's important to remember is that this actually isn't just a progressive versus a moderate issue. You have some of the most conservative members of the Democratic caucus, like Joe Manchin, that have even signaled support for a $4 trillion infrastructure plan, which is double in the numbers.
That is incredibly key there at the end, because infrastructure is wildly popular, and a senator like Joe Manchin is going to want that infrastructure to target a state like West Virginia specifically. This is going to go through reconciliation. They're going to get 0 Republican votes on this. So there is no excuse for this bill to be as small as it is. Even though the Biden administration is claiming this is only half of what they plan to do, why make it only half of what you plan to do? This is going to go through reconciliation. You can make it as big as you possibly want, and you essentially have to say how you're going to pay for it, which is Biden saying it's going to be on taxing earners, people who earn over $400,000 a year, and raising the corporate tax rate. You know how you could make it bigger, Biden, is by making the corporate tax rate back to what it was, 35% at a bare minimum, and not going to 28%. It's going to be a way to raise the necessary revenue if you're that concerned about paying for it through the arcane rules of reconciliation. But what Ocasio-Cortez is saying there, and what a lot of progressives in Congress are saying, is that they are going to start from that $2.25 trillion number and build it up in the House. And then you can use Manchin's own words against him. The thing about Manchin is he'll forget what he said the day before, as long as he's able to be at the bill's passage in the 11th hour, able to cut it down and say, look, I made it smaller. I bucked the Biden administration and the socialists like Ocasio-Cortez, basically. But before that happens, it is on her and it is on the other Democrats in the House to make it as large as possible. Because as she makes the case there, the $1.9 trillion stimulus package that was passed in order to allow people to survive and bolster the economy after COVID, that was filled with provisions that are going to expire at maximum over 2 years. This package that's $2.25 trillion is meant for 10 years of infrastructure. That is really not enough when you put it in those terms. So that's why she's saying that $10 trillion figure. It's not going to be that. There's no way. But it's got to be a lot bigger than it is. And I think she's making the case incredibly effectively, especially because not all of the provisions in this bill are targeting climate change in the way that they need to be. This is not even close to a Green New Deal. And Biden is whittling it down for seemingly obtuse reasons, especially when you have Manchin who's making it clear that he would want something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's for reasons of oligarchy, I think. Like, it's because Bill Gates and people like that are talking about, I don't know if you saw Bill Gates's comment, how we need multiple parties, because when you start trying to give everyone a job while you address climate change, then you must be reading Karl Marx and singing the Internationale. Like, that's the mood of the rich and the powerful and who control the economic, priorities of this country right now. And that's what's very frustrating about the Democrats is, like, you think you'd only have to worry about, the actual party caucus and whipping them, but you actually have to, there's these unspoken vetoes by, the money people. And I mean, obviously that exists in the Republicans, but it's very frustrating. I understand when people see it on the Democratic side.
Especially because this has been a strategic move by the Democratic Party to appeal to wealthier people in the country. And you've seen demographic shifts where wealthier donors, now they're trending more Democratic. So part of this is also just appealing to those sensibilities, and you have to fight those forces. And again, the civil war against the corporate wing of the Democratic Party isn't over. And it's just going to get exacerbated when you have those moneyed interests turning to the Democratic Party after they felt very offended by Donald Trump. And Bill Gates is a very vocal voice in that area.